welcome for Chancellor Jean-Pierre.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Brown. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Welcome to Southern University, and welcome to the College of Business, and welcome to the idea that when universities, industry, and community leaders come together, we can produce transformative change. And that's the real key. In other words, we don't live in this cocoon or in a tower where we don't have impact to our community. We have the Dean of the College of Science and Engineering here, Dr. Leland Martin, who's one of his faculty members also got a grant with the Department of Energy to deal with energy issues. So we have the College of Science and Engineering, the College of Business being led by a great leader here who's talking about future energy. And why is this important? It's because energy in the state of Louisiana is a big deal, and we cannot function without it. We can't do anything without it, and we have to be able to recognize that we have to have a part in saying how it's going to be used and how it's going to be produced. Too many times, energy has been produced in a way that is toxic to our communities. And we have got to figure out different ways to be a part of that, and we have not been part of the economic side of the energy industry, and therefore we have to come together and bring results. And so whenever we have individuals who are bringing these ideas to us, my position is we have got to take advantage of the resources we have here to help be part of the solution. Otherwise, we're irrelevant. We're a community, and we have to recognize that our impact on community is as important as anything else we do. We graduate students, we do all kinds of stuff with research, but it's impact on community, to me, that is most important. And I really appreciate the fact that you all wanted to connect with us and work with us, and we're doing everything possible to make this an ecosystem that produces positive outcomes. So thank you all for coming. And again, for the students that are here, this is an opportunity for you to become engaged in something that you may one day be part of the solution. And that's the real key. We got to be part of the solution. So thank you very, very much. And I know this is going to be great. I got to run to another meeting. They have me running from here to there, but I would not have this be here today without being able to say thank you for coming and sharing your time. And let's all work together. Go Jags.
Pierre. Now, for our speaker today, became local, Baton Rouge Area Chamber. Davorio Stevenson is the economic inclusion manager at Baton Rouge Area Chamber. But first and foremost, he's an alumni of Southern University. So with all the conversations that we were having, his number one thing was how do we make this work? How do we get this to the students? How do we help to make Southern as much a part of this energy expansion as we possibly can? So I'm super excited to introduce him as our speaker, not only because he is part of our economic development partner, but more so because he is a Southern alumni, has a lot of love for the school, and he wanted to make a massive difference in this region. So without further ado, I would like to give to you Mr. Davorio Stevenson. Thank him for giving us time to speak today.
Oh, this is gonna be fun.
Yeah.
You know, people say, I'll be honest, my word of choice is transparent. So in this entire conversation, let me know if this mic, echoes it all. in this entire conversation, I'm going to use that word, like, let's be transparent about, what the thoughts are, the ideas, the feelings, the emotions. And honestly, this was my speech, but this is my thought, okay? Because it's really, to be quite frank, I think it's about how the room feels. A lot more students than I expected, a lot more folks showed up than I expected in terms of here at the university. So it's a lot that we're going to cover today. You're too kind, and you gave me 30 minutes. It should have been more like 3. Okay. I'm joking. You guys are supposed to laugh about that. But here we are. Look, Southern University is really surreal because, to be quite frank, when I saw the poster of myself on the wall, I'm like, wait a second, like, that was part of the deal, Leroy? Because honestly, I'm used to being behind the scenes, more so like a strategist. And I'm gonna give my background, the humble beginnings from a rural area, Catawba Parish, Jonesville, Louisiana. And a few things we're gonna talk about are just really basic elements of, first of all, who we are as people first, right? Because in a lot of cases, what's really important to me is the core of the work that we're doing in a sense that is industry agnostic. This is just one opportunity of many possibly, right? So here we are talking about energy today, but what if we're talking about biotechnology next month or next year, right? What is the infrastructure built like? What are the capabilities throughout the community? But I'm gonna give a really interesting perspective because it's really top down. And I think for me, a lot of my learnings came from my time at a public pension fund. So I'm gonna give a little bit about my background and when I had my aha moment, because even coming through these hallways, I didn't realize who I was until I got into the real world. So if anyone's having that, what they call imposter syndrome, trust me, I learned that years later after graduating, where I finally realized what my passion was. But anyway, I will start from the top, right? So there's a few things I'm gonna unshare the screen because there's a few notes I wanna make sure we touch. So give me 1 second if you guys don't mind. Okay? All right, we're good? So first and foremost, pull up my document here. So I got a few talking points. So first and foremost, happy Wednesday, folks. Thank you guys for taking the time for being here. I'm a little more excited than I am nervous. Again, not used to really kind of being in the forefront because in my career was really at public pension funds, investing, being behind the scenes, working with investment managers. But I'm really excited because, to be quite frank, I think this is the amazing beginning of a big effort, right? But there's a word that comes to mind, and look, I got something that's really rare. You guys probably haven't seen this before. It's a dollar. It's a little contest we're gonna play, right? But I'm gonna make fun of this dollar because again, it speaks to evolution, right? Who in here has cash in their pocket right now? Evolution and innovation, all right? All right, what about the students? Who has literally cash? Okay. And I'm not trying to count bank accounts, but I'm speaking to 20 years ago. You would ask that question, probably everybody would have raised their hand because now we use fintech and Bitcoin and digital assets, all those things, right? So again, I'm going to tie in the thought around innovation because this conversation will touch on innovation as well. But again, that's the word that comes to mind, and that word is challenge, right? How do you guys feel about the word challenge? Is that a welcoming word? Is it a word what's the thoughts around the word challenge? Anyone want to answer that? One of the students? Competition? Anyone else? When we say challenge, what comes to mind?
Accountability.
Okay, it's a good one.
Excitement.
Adversity, okay. Opportunity. Who said that? Opportunity. So I'm gonna take, kind of give my perspective on the word challenge, right? Normally when we think about challenges, it's a contest. Basketball, right? It's a challenge when if I think about the spelling bee, it's a contest, right? It's a challenge. But there's an opportunity associated with that. So what I really want to get excited about is the word opportunity here. So again, what I see in front of us, a couple challenges. What's your thoughts on that, Dr. Martin? Overcome, right?
Yeah.
So I want to kind of bring those things into scope as we kind of level set because there's a lot for us individually and collectively to be excited about. But anyway, let's get started. Let's get to business, all right? So first and foremost, again, I thank you all for being here. And as I stated earlier, it's quite a surprise because I wasn't the original speaker. It's Brad Lambert from LED, right? So I look at Leroy like a coach who, when you're in the gym, he kind of puts the weights on and say, dude, just figure it out. Thank you, coach, all right? So thank you to you for kind of helping break the ice and kind of put me in this place where I'm forced to step up and kind of, speak to the things that I see. Another thing that I guess you guys would like some context of how we all got here. So I was at Louisiana Teachers for about 7 years. Graduated in accounting here at Southern. My first job out of college was with the Hershey Company, and I was traveling. I was doing some work in the region, but I was traveling to New York. The Hershey Company was in Pennsylvania. Then I had an aha moment because I really worked closely with the CFO, a guy named Bert Alfonso. And I don't know if you guys have noticed the challenge around cocoa prices lately, but that was one of the issues we was having back in 2010 around cocoa prices. So I would engage with Bert Alfonso, and he would come down because he's one of our regional champions. We would meet in New Orleans, and we would talk about what we'd be doing around cocoa prices. We were hedging, right? We were literally buying financial derivatives to kind of control the price hikes in cocoa. But his word to me was like, Davorio, why didn't you focus on finance, right? Because I graduated here in accounting, didn't want to be an accountant because that was too much about understanding the rules and looking backwards. I'm like, how do I look forward? How do I predict what's ahead of us? What are pro formas? What are those things, right? So I decided to enroll at LSU in the Master in Finance program, and I kind of hit the ground running with an opportunity to get out to San Francisco with the Bank of America. I was working with Merrill Lynch, and what I would share with you guys was that the moment I showed up to Berkeley and I got off the BART, I had this on. It was like 90 degrees. And I'll never forget kind of walking up out of the substation, realized that I had signed up for something that I didn't know what the hell was in front of me, excuse my language. Because there was complete chaos on the streets. And I'm walking in the suit at noon. My first time, a little boy from Jonesville, Louisiana, in Berkeley, California, with an assignment to be in San Francisco every day, wearing shoes like this, walking to a park, right? Which is the public transportation system. So I only bring that into scope because I just remember that moment of saying, what did I sign up for? What's in front of me? It was a challenge, but again, past that challenge was the opportunity. What did that opportunity look like? That opportunity looked like, meeting with folks, being in coffee shops and hearing some of the conversations about capital raises, things that you just wouldn't hear in this region. So again, I think about, by kind of overcoming that challenge, what opportunity did it present? It presented this opportunity for me to learn, right? Not just in the environment that I thought I would be learning in, but just in the environment with all the folks in that area, right? So I think about that, and that comes to mind as I kind of want to level set about, who is Davorio and why we're here. Another thing I like to bring into scope is this idea of going back to Leroy, and again, Leroy, thank you for this opportunity. But I want to say that I'm indebted to you, Leroy. I'm indebted to everyone in this room. And I think that's a nature of how we should present ourselves, where we kind of look across to our partners, our classmates, our co-workers, and we lean into this thing of owing each other, right? Owing each other better information, owing each other better direction, owing each other support. So I want to bring that to scope as well. But truly, this is a conversation about people, but you guys came here to learn about H to the future and the opportunities ahead. And Dr. Sambaksu, there's things that I would love to kind of point to you about around your class, because again, you have students here. So maybe you could share a few words with us about your role in H to the Future project, and from there I can kind of pinpoint the conversation. Do you mind?
Sure. Well, our journey with the H to the Future has started like a couple years ago now. And I was working with GNO to build a new energy management curriculum here at the College of Business. And before we even got the award, we were awarded, we have already started to build that curriculum because of our belief, for this need. So we had this responsibility to fill this gap. So we have been working on it for the 2 years, and so in fact, I think our program is the first one that has been launched, and we have been teaching new energy management courses since last year. We do have students taking our courses, including my students here with me, Alvin. And last week, in fact, we were at Brussels, Belgium, to visit the energy cluster. Mm-hmm. And we have seen it with our own eyes that has been possible. So in fact, you can see the cars that are running on, hydrogen. We have been to research institutes that is working on hydrogen transformation, and we have seen that this is possible. So all we need is just to come together with the community partners, with small businesses, universities, and hopefully we will do our role here at the College of Business Southern University, and hopefully we will see that this is possible, and we are gonna make this happen.
Thank you, Dr. Samakasua. How many students are enrolled in your class?
It depends. This year, we have started with 6 students. We have 10 students enrolled in our class this year, and this is our second course, and hopefully we will offer the remaining 2 courses in fall. So we will start graduating students with a new energy concentration next year.
And just a quick question, what's been the level of support from, I say support, but what does the corporation, the job track look like? What corporations are there? I think about the ecosystem, I think about RWE, for example, right? With their need of future workforce. What does that look like from your perspective?
In fact, I mean, now that you have mentioned about RWE, we have been working with them since the beginning, and hopefully they will be the first of many guest speakers here at the College of Business. So we have already invited them to visit us here at the campus and talk to our students, and they have been supported. So we are definitely looking forward to work with them.
Yeah. So I want to shift the thought, and guys, excuse me, because again, what I want to do more than anything is really engage with you all and think about what's really important. What comes top of mind first and foremost is something I realized back in 2017 when I was at Louisiana Teachers, and for you who, when we say Louisiana Teachers, the public pension fund of Louisiana Teachers. So when I finished the program at LSU, I had an opportunity to intern while there, but I left Baton Rouge, moved over to Houston, and I was with the CBRE, which is a real estate advisory firm. And again, looking at real estate as an asset class, not as just the typical, again, we would look at hotels, multifamily units, but it was about the underwriting process and I guess we'll call it more of the cash flow and the streams of cash for CBRE's perspective from an investment standpoint. So again, top-down real estate as an asset class. But I left there and came back to Louisiana to join Louisiana Teachers as the Director of Investment Operations. That's something I want to kind of speak to because while there, my experience kind of seemed like this. So imagine some of your top investment firms in the world, the KKRs, if you guys ever heard of it, the Apollo Global Managements, the PIMCOs, the TPG, some of the billion-dollar asset managers would fly down either to New Orleans, sometimes to Baton Rouge, take a ride to Essent Lane and raise $100 million, $200 million, sometimes $500 million at a time for us to invest in things, right? But where would we invest that dollar, right? So again, put this into perspective, each month we would commit hundreds of millions of dollars. When committing those hundreds of millions of dollars, you're allocating money to investment managers that have a strategy, a global strategy. So there I want to take you guys, put you guys into this boardroom where you will see some of the best investment managers speak to things like, AI, biotechnology, and then also renewable energy. So back in 2021, there was a group, and some of this is public information, but we can't talk about the actual assets. But Louisiana Teachers made a commitment to a firm called Asterion Industrial Partners. And in their deck, which is confidential information, what they talked about heavily was offshore wind in Europe. And your travel was to Belgium? And I bring that into scope for one reason. How many of you guys bought a TV recently? Anybody here how much was it when you purchased that television?
About 500.
500? What size was it, if you don't mind?
65.
65 inch for 500?
At Sam's.
So let's think about that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, right?
Yeah.
15 years ago, 10 years ago. 65 inch TV, $500, you think? More?
I bought a 42 inch maybe 10, 12 years ago for a couple thousand.
Why is that, you think? Why is that?
Availability,
Availability?
competition.
What you think, Mr. Simpson? Why is that? Why would a TV 10 years ago, right, today be $500, but 10 years ago, why would that price not be $500 10 years ago?
Well, it's kind of what he's saying. It's availability, supply and demand,
Okay.
price elasticity. But ultimately, the world has become more efficient at transforming matter.
Mhm.
into the things we consume, whether it's the automobile you drive, the shoes you wear.
Mhm.
Our ability to produce those things and transform that matter into something usable has improved hundreds of X,
Absolutely.
right? So the cost per unit to produce is dropped down.
So would that apply at all to the offshore wind or renewable energy space, you think? I mean, we're talking about technology, innovation, transformation, right?
I think so.
So again, when we think about, some of the things that happened earlier this year on the North Shore, I can't think of the wind farm that was New York based, right? Yes, some of the biggest write-offs with companies like Ørsted, maybe BP as well, where they were writing off these assets, these wind farms, and the way they were performing. Because again, it was things that made constraints, supply chain, one, inflation, the cost of borrowing was another. But the reason I bring all that up is to kind of think through what will offshore wind look like 10 years from now. Will we expect it to be the same price? Will we expect it to be uneconomical at that point, right? So again, what I say all that just to say, the students here today, what the opportunities look like today may look totally different tomorrow because of economies of scale, right? So the question is, to the title of this event is Readiness. Louisiana Future Energy Community, Readiness. And back to the earlier statement about the core of this group and what I think is really important is the core of this community ready, right? To do some of the things that John Pierre mentioned, to participate, to perform, to work, to have jobs, to teach, to educate, to share information, to be a part of that growth if possible, right? So that's my thought, right? Looking at Louisiana teachers making those investments early in 2021, 2020, sometimes 2017, you can see when we were making those bets early in different countries, making private funding available for the costs associated with producing those results, right? Here's the dollar coming in to kind of drive the innovation, costs come down, now it's more economical, and I want to show you guys something that just popped up yesterday, so just bear with me here. But I was just kind of scrolling through, and I thought this chart was extremely interesting. As you can see, the date was April 23rd, 2024. Wasn't looking for this, but I'll read it all just to kind of help give some depth. But wind overtakes fossil fuels for UK electricity generation. Wind overtakes fossil fuels. Petroleum, oil and gas. You can look at the charts and kind of see the yellow line versus the black line. And what was really interesting, they wanted to capture that this was the first time it happened in 2 consecutive quarters, where wind contributed more to the grid, the UK power grid, more than fossil fuels did, which I think is a strong sign to what to expect in the future.
Wow.
What's your thoughts on that, Dr. Samuel Sewell? I gotta look. I'm not to pick on you, but you're the professional here. I don't.
Yeah, I mean that doesn't come as a surprise. I mean, like I said, I mean there is a trend that you can see that clearly. I mean, and I would say this. I mean, wind is one of the, I would say, the older technologies by now because it has proven itself. It's just a matter of time. As you have mentioned, I mean, it's all about supply chain and developing that supply chain. And like I said, it's just a matter of time. We have to start looking for other forms of renewable energy like hydrogen or the others to complement it, because you cannot just rely on wind energy. Obviously, you have to diversify it. So, I mean, I'm a strong advocate for all those sources of renewable energy. Wind is one of the obvious ones. So, I'm pretty sure we'll see this happening for the rest of Europe and the States pretty soon.
Absolutely.
So when you're looking at wind energy, how do you sort of account for, you still need to have that backup supply there, right? Because when the wind
Storage,
is blowing and it's not producing the electricity, when that hit that light switch, that's the
Absolutely.
lights go on.
So I'll get back to your question. I'll make this point where I went to test this out with my mom yesterday, and I called her, and she called me back 2 hours later. I said, hey, I just had this one question for you. I said, think about it. I said, what's our most valuable natural resource? And I want to pick on the students when I ask this, right? I got this dollar here. I want someone to win it. But I asked her, just simple. Like, I want to test this out and see, give me the top 5 natural resources that we have. But anyone want to name a natural resource? I mean, it's one I'm thinking about. But go ahead.
Water.
Air.
Or
The sun.
It was the students. But go ahead. I'm gonna.
Yeah, I was just going with water.
You gonna go with water?
Wind. Yeah, water.
Okay, what else? Somebody said oil?
Yeah, I said the sun.
You're gonna say the sun, of course, man. But, okay, so it was the sun, right? And the thought is, because there's been a few projects that kind of come across, I think it was Morehouse Parish.
Yeah.
You got any insight on Morehouse Parish?
Yeah.
Can you give me the 245 million from Amazon, 1,400 acres of land?
Yeah, so it's basically, you have to have data centers to kind of drive, big corporations. So Amazon is building one of the largest solar developments in Morehouse Parish, but it's aligned to north and south and east and west. It's like right in the middle of the nation.
You know the project better than I do. And what really comes to mind when I saw that project was the rural development component, USDA focus, those things, right? And me being from a rural area, like folks say, hey man, when you go home, there's nothing there. There's literally nothing there. But to that point, what you think? Is there something there?
Yeah, I mean, that's good, there's nothing there, because the limiting factor is the land.
The space is there. You buy advertisement on a billboard, you're buying space. When you're buying cloud and paying $199 to Google, you're buying space, right? So the space is there, the opportunity is there. So only bring that thought up again, because again, perspective, right? Solar, wind, to your point, water. Then there's oil, there's gas, there's other natural commodities that we can actually physically see. Then there's things that we can't even touch that we see every day that if it went away, my mom kind of joked and laughed about the sun going away, what would happen then, right? So again, how do we participate in that natural resource? How do we participate in the ecosystem is a question. And again, that was for the students. But none of y'all get this dollar, by the way. None of y'all want it, apparently. But anyway, there's a few more things I want to share with you guys, and again, we can leave the rest for Q&A. But I want this to be fun. Listen, my thought was to really engage with the audience. Everybody in this room has a superpower. I almost want to go around the room and ask that question, because ultimately it is about everybody in the room. There's no way possible any corporation did it by themselves. Exxon couldn't do it without their workforce and their staff. Southern University couldn't be a great university without its leadership. So again, it's about everybody in the room. It's not about Davorio or Leroy, or it's about the entire unit of folks. The question is, what are we doing in this category? So, any questions? Anyone have any questions just to kind of shift the thinking? Anybody? Any students have any questions?
My question would be, how do y'all focus more on sustainability over the long run? Because you see a lot of corporations and companies come with solutions to solve problems, and they solve them for maybe 10, 20 years or so, but it's ultimately my generation or the generation from asking me to have to pick it up and deal with it. So how do you bridge that gap and focus more on the sustainability across generations?
Okay, so you reminded me of something that I wanted to say as well. It was a strong thought around how did we get here to this place, and how many of you got, it's the last time I asked you for this question, but what comes to mind is ESG. Are you familiar with ESG at all?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I want to share this, and this was back in 2014. I was studying for this certification called the CFA, Chartered Financial Analyst. It really speaks to the global investment community, and I say global for a reason, because in 2015 there was this thing called the Paris Agreement. You familiar with the Paris Agreement?
Yes, sir.
What's your thoughts on the Paris Agreement?
I feel that it was necessary. I feel that
Can you explain to the audience what the Paris Agreement?
my understanding of the Paris
Yep, you understand
Paris
it.
Agreement is that it was an energy agreement to try to cut carbon emissions.
Love it. And again, there was this thing that I realized around ESG from an institutional investing standpoint. So let me kind of walk you through this thought process, and anyone can chime in at any time, okay? So imagine in 2014, I take this exam and I realized they inserted something brand new around ESG standards, global investment standards around ESG policies and what that looked like. So I give you a comparable to something that I was doing while at Louisiana Teachers. We used to literally divest on the companies that were called prohibited nations, right? Countries that did business with companies that did business with companies on this bad list. And we would literally sell all the securities, no matter how big a position we had, right? It was a small portfolio, but it was called the Terror-Free Nations portfolio that was attached to an index that we used to look at and just kind of replicate. In-house, we would manage that portfolio. Maybe $70 million, not a lot, right? Compared to 26 billion. But again, they kind of replicated what I was saying around ESG, where from a public equity standpoint, investing in public companies, the stockholders or the investors really control the decisions of the board. Going back to ESG, the Paris Agreement was one thing that comes to mind. So when you ask that question about sustainability, that's the thought that I have. Dr. Sandberg may have a better answer, right? But my thought really is around what's driving this demand for companies to be sustainable and hold them accountable. It's the dollar. It's this thing. This wrinkle thing. It wouldn't go in the car wash, that's why I still got it. All right? But it's this thing that, from my perspective, when you're looking at Exxon taking initiatives, and I don't know who's in here that may be familiar with Exxon's initiative to do the innovation suite on this side of town. Dr. Lena Martin, are you familiar with that initiative?
Which initiative?
Matter of fact, it's Josh isn't here anymore, but the innovation suite by ExxonMobil.
I think I had a conversation about it just last week with someone from ExxonMobil.
Yep, and I may pull it up just for demonstration, but again, looking at their commitment to renewable energy, again, very traditional in terms of their business, but they know that the demand is there based on the voters' confidence from hey, what does the security look like in terms of buyers, demand being around the stock, right? So ultimately, I think the accountability to sustainability be held based on policies like that to kind of speak to the global investment community. That's my thought. In terms of what keeps those things in place, what's even creating that conversation right now, I think is largely sovereign wealth funds, institutional investors, right? Large corporate pensions are saying, retirement funds are saying, hey, we're gonna commit our dollar, or we're gonna decommit and de-invest if you guys don't commit to these environmental, social, and governance components. So that's my thought to your question. But that's on the public side, right? But that's my thought. Any guys familiar with this conference happening? Of course you are. That's a cheat sheet for you. Anyone familiar with this happening in New Orleans right now? IPF, International Partnering Forum. So you have guys who are, Salim, oh God, I gotta put you on the spot. Tell us about IPF if you don't mind. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, so IPF, the International Partnering Forum, is an international wind conference that's hosted every year, and they pick a new location to host. And so this year it's in New Orleans, which makes a lot of sense considering all the activity in the offshore wind space happening in Louisiana compared to other parts of the country. And so actually the Gulf Coast has had, so with offshore wind, it's dependent on the Bureau of Oceanic Energy Management clearing areas off the coast to make sure that everything's good for wind farms to be built. So far the 3 areas in the country where this can happen is the Atlantic, the West Coast, and the Gulf Coast. We had our first auction last year that was successful. And we're moving towards our second one, which will happen this fall. And we're the only region in the country to be moving towards our second auction. And so that's why so much attention is happening in this region, because of our unique place in the supply chain, the unique properties of our coast that make it a really strong place for offshore wind. Mm-hmm. So that's why IPF is happening here.
Absolutely. And the thought that comes upon the tail end that you mentioned RWE and actual auctions that happen, but I bring up this, and you may play a role around the supplier list, GNO Inc.'s partnership with RWE, but they're looking for companies to participate. They're calling for action on small businesses to come in and participate in this industry. That's correct?
Yes.
There's 123 companies, I think. A lot of small businesses.
Within our database, I'm sure there's so many more.
And again, the supply chain, the value chain. I even think of good businesses like auto parts that may play a role. I say auto parts, but again, within that industry, right? Whether it's a business like yours, I'm sorry to kind of put you on the spot, but you're here. Tell us about your business if you don't mind. Quentin.
Quentin Motley, owner of 1-800 Radiator in AC. We wholesale automotive. We're the biggest wholesaler of automotive parts in the state of Louisiana. We wholesale radiators, condensers, compressors, catalytic converters. So, like retailers like AutoZone, O'Reilly's, Meineke, your mechanic shops, they don't have the capacity to hold these parts in their establishment. So they call us and we wholesale it to them, and they kind of mark it up to the retailer.
So when I think of parts, I never built a wind turbine before in my life, but I do think about a business owner like you within this industry. When I think of transitioning typical companies that exist in one vertical today, what does it look, they lean into a new emerging industry for Louisiana? So Quentin, I think of you from time to time in regards to that. But anyway, let's kind of get to, I thought this was really interesting. And I'm gonna go through like maybe 4 or 5 of these. But this is something I pulled earlier because it was in Brack's report, and I want to go back and look at an updated list. But this is energy use per person as it's measured to GDP, right? Really interesting, right? So I'm gonna kind of go through the next slide and show you North America first. This is North America, kind of see what we lean, right? United States at the very top, Canada there. So again, speaking to GDP, it seems as if my takeaway, the wealth.
It's not on the screen. It's frozen.
It's frozen? Is it back on?
No.
Keep going, yeah.
Let me try sharing.
You know, while you're doing that, I'm watching this, I'm looking at this turbine, right? This wind turbine.
Yep.
Magnificent, beautiful day. And then I'm thinking, right, we've had windmills for what, hundreds of years at least, if not thousands, right? So going back to the question that you asked the gentleman about his television, right? Bought the 42-inch was $2,000 10 years ago, and now the 65-inch is $500 this year. So if we wanted to draw an analogy between, I'm trying to buy you time while you.
Thank you. I need the time.
But you know, if we were to draw that same analogy in terms of, you know, windmills, right? It's just a windmill, right? What is the difference between the windmill of, you know, the 1300s and the windmill of today, right? The wind, I mean, the wind comes from the sun, basically. It's the relationship between the sun, the moon, and the earth, pretty much. And that's I mean, on our time scale, that's pretty much a constant. So you can argue that the wind that's available now is the same wind that was available at that time, right? But what's the difference now between those windmills and then these wind turbines?
Sophisticated parts.
And maybe it's for the students. Maybe it's for the students to think about, right? If you want to think about like it from an economic standpoint, or you want to think about it from a technology standpoint, and then marry those two things to gain insight on the evolution of wind technology. You know, what's really the difference? I mean, the technology itself is the same. You got a blade, it spins around, and you get energy, right? So the technology, pretty much.
And look, what comes to mind is the point I was thinking through or holding on earlier was, and it kind of comes to, and Celine, your team is really leading, GNO is driving a lot around the ecosystem, who's participating, you know, from a supplier standpoint. Where I think the opportunity is that when you have these large corporations that say, hey, wait a second, we want to be in this region because it makes sense. Infrastructure-wise, industry expertise-wise, you guys have everything, but where are the people who can help this ecosystem move, right? Where are the innovators? Where are the suppliers? Where's the wire, the folks who make the wire that kind of goes internally within the actual turbine? Where are those folks? Because if they have to export those folks, import those folks, it's a cost. It's a cost associated with moving folks from Belgium to Louisiana. How can we find that here? It's a cheaper cost of doing business. So if they come here and evaluate that and don't see that talent here or that participation here, then what happens? Do they go to Mississippi? Do they go to Texas? Where those things are more resourceful. So my point is, how do we ensure that we're presenting ourselves as a community that's ready, right? Because ultimately, this is about Louisiana advancing, not just, you know, Baton Rouge region, New Orleans, or Shreveport. It really is about how do we live in Louisiana.
I just wanted to piggyback off of what he said. I'm sorry, so what's your name?
Oh, Leland Martin.
Mr. Martin. It sounds like, because that's a good question. We've been having this for a while now. We can look back at these Little Red Robin Hood books, and we've seen these in the back pictures. But it seems like with big corporations, they create a buy-in in the community, and they also add a disaster, like the word is coming in, we need this. And all of a sudden, we transition into these type of things. That's
Yeah, yes, I mean.
It's been a while for one.
Yeah, it has, right? I mean, I think the way to think about it, I mean, this is my opinion, this is my wrong opinion, right? So I think the way to think about it is if you look at the windmills that we had back in the day, right? What did you do with them, right? What did we use the energy to do? Well, we harnessed the energy to grind stuff, right? It was to grind corn or to grind things, right? And grind food. So now, well, what is this doing now? So now we're using this wind to generate electricity. And so we can do a lot more with the energy that we harnessed with this wind turbine than we could have done with than we could have done with the windmill from 500 years ago. So it's a question of, well, energy is only as good as your ability to harness it, right? And so if you're able to harness it in a cheaper, faster, and if you're able to transmit it for farther distances, or if you're able to convert it to a form of energy that you can then readily use, right? So a windmill from 500 years ago, you couldn't use that windmill, the energy from that windmill necessarily to power a horse and buggy, right? But we can use this windmill now to generate electricity that we can put in a battery and put in a car and drive, right? So,
Yep.
So,
please.
I want to touch on something that I think you and I had conversation.
Wait a second. You gotta give us your background, Mr. Simpson. You
Yeah.
have to.
I got it.
You have to.
All right. Well, my name is Gerald Simpson. I'm an entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur. I own a small manufacturing business. I left Dell about 15 years ago to start manufacturing cable assemblies to connect video displays inside your laptops or your cell phone. I make cables for everybody from Qualcomm to Amazon to Intel. I'm a product of the boot, I should say. I grew up in the streets in Lake Charles, Louisiana, Gosport projects, and finished high school from Lamarck, Texas. My dad's from Galveston, my mom's from Lake Charles. But from a kid who left home at 14 to an entrepreneur, I have a master's degree in commercializing science and technology from the University of Texas at Austin, and a bachelor's from Texas A&M in aerospace engineering. I am here because this young man invited me, and I love to see young people of color especially doing their thing, but good people doing their thing, especially young people. And so I was kind of touched by some of the things you brought up, and one of the ones I wanted to come back to in this conversation about the turbines. One thing to think about is the scale of a windmill of yesterday in Norway amongst the lilies, one of the flowers, tulips, versus and say a windmill on a farm that gave power to a family on that farm, versus these gigantic things that stand towers, stories above whatever they are next to, that deliver power to larger scale of people. Our understanding of how to manipulate energy hasn't changed since Einstein's theory of relativity, E equals mc squared. But our ability to know how to manipulate it better is improving. And how to scale that up to deliver it is improving. But as I thought about what you talked about, the thing that struck to me is the challenge, as you put it. There's a number of challenges that come with this, right? There's a challenge of, I recently bought a ranch about 3 years ago to help hunt. And one that I looked at had these turbines on it. And one of the questions I asked the owner was, okay, so when these things are decommissioned and out of use life, what happens to it? Who gets rid of it? So that's a challenge that you guys have to think about, because most of us got 1 foot in the cemetery, may not be here. So who's gonna get rid of all that? My senior project in aerospace engineering was a low Earth orbiting satellite collection system to get rid of the waste that's gonna be left behind from the many satellites that get launched and left in space.
That's another conversation.
Some of them come back down. The challenge of race, where do they go? Of economics. It's almost like the electoral college, right? A lot of rural area, few people populating, but a lot of power in the electoral college. Solar farms are gonna go somewhere. Where are they gonna go? So we have to think about this. But I think the biggest challenge that I think about more often than not isn't those things. It's not the money per se. It's what are you guys, the students, gonna do tomorrow? How do you see yourself in this universe? And I thought about our conversation after that. Everything in this technology space, it's either you're gonna be an employee or an employer. Which one do you want to be? How do you see yourself involved? And how do we prepare our children for this future so that they're not left out? Or they're involved not just as a Bean County employee in some back room. How do you get a place at the table? How do you shape the thoughts about how we harness energy at this scale and what we do with it? It's one thing to say, I can scale up turbines to generate enough power to replace UK's electricity consumption. There's a whole wealth of technologies and monies that get made around that you need to know how you're gonna participate in it, and we need to know how to get you ready to participate in it as a human being. Not a black one, not a red one, a human being. Because whether we like it or not, we got a limited amount of matter that we're dealing with. Until somebody figures out how we can go hang out on the moon or a different planet, we gotta share what we got. So the sooner we get over our past and ourselves to realize that, the sooner we can start to think about it. And you have that opportunity as a kid to think about how are you gonna play in this space? What knowledge do you need to play in that space? How can this professor teach you how to be prepared for that space?
Q, you had a question?
Yeah, and to piggyback off that, first of all, appreciate that whole perspective, and to even tally up my perspective around it, and me and you talk about this a lot. The biggest challenge I know I see being young in the area is lack of exposure. So, can you speak to that in some aspect? Because I think the biggest issue, frustration I think I have is all of this stuff is beautiful, but nobody knows about it.
Yeah.
You ask the question where are other people, but they don't even know this exists.
That goes back to the opening statement about the basic criteria it takes, and again, the mindset too.
Absolutely.
And I mentioned the thing about the core and looking at Southern University or any organization as a core piece of that, I'm gonna call it relational infrastructure, if you will, right?
Yeah.
If I'm thinking about the end goal, and I know we're looking at time, so my response to your question is this: it really is about the people and how we respond. And a demonstration I could point to is his demonstration when he reached out and kind of erred on I say error, but was willing to err on the idea of not having everything right, but want to get it done and allowing it to happen. And I trusted that, so that's why I thank you for that. Because he had the courage to come into this environment and say, "Davorio, let's just figure it out." And literally, we're just figuring this out today. As you see, this PowerPoint is not ready. Because we just put this together because we knew it was important to get the group in the room to continue the conversation. That was really important. So when it comes to number one, how do we be effective with that? Number one, it's a process. So the first thing, we need y'all. That's number one. I don't know if it's an email list, but there's information that we can literally, kind of put into a Google Doc and share with groups. Because to your point, if you're not aware, then what? So the awareness piece is really big. Britt is here. Britt, let me quick on the spot.
Yeah.
But I wanted to commend Britt for something too, because she and I started around the same time at Bragg, and she started like a month ahead, right? And I'll never forget and if you haven't met Britt, she's like when we talk about energy, she's the perfect person because she has all the energy, promise you. But when I met her, she initially kind of dropped this on our team and said, "Davorio, where are the businesses that meet this profile? The rural businesses, the disadvantaged businesses." That was the question. And to be quite frank, we kind of left puzzled because we couldn't identify who, right? And that's not to say anything about Baton Rouge, because I kind of go back to this thought back in 2020, and I'll share this with you guys, was that I was working and advising this startup venture firm out of Menlo, California, Menlo Park, right? led by a guy by the name of Marquise Cabrera. He spent time at IBM, left and went to do this $1 billion fund globally, right? Before COVID really got, in the way. And he's in Dubai right now. He's received a commitment of $50 million to manage money in the UAE with the same strategy. But long story short, he was tasked with identifying minority-owned business for Apple. It was a project called Reggie. You guys can kind of look this up. It was the Racial Equity Justice Initiative. And he put together about 7 people, including himself, it was 8 total. And I was one of those 8. And we had this calling to identify minority-owned businesses in the clean energy space and had trouble finding those guys nationally. This is Apple we were responding to. We had an RFP, won an award to actually go out there and do the work for Apple to identify folks in the clean tech space. And again, had the challenge of being able to identify those folks. So to your point, the awareness component, right? We had that same challenge of finding or making folks aware of the opportunity. It was a big initiative, so there was folks that were identified, but it was the same thing that we kind of ran into here in this region, right? It's to your point, there's things that we have to do as folks, as people, and I think it kind of goes back to this thing about imposter syndrome, like really realizing who we are. There's people I put on the spot today that didn't expect that. Quentin, you're one of them. Dr. Simpson's another, right? But it's needed in order to communicate who we really are as people too. Because if I know what he does, and he knows what, then it works. Because it literally is about the communication. And to be very transparent, through this man, I met Mario McGowan. Through Mario McGowan, there was an introduction to Marvina, but there was also an introduction to Mr. Simpson. And when he introduced me to his profile on LinkedIn, my response was, that's the guy I need to talk to. He's the guy. Because there's things that I see in this space that I wouldn't understand from an engineering standpoint, but from a business standpoint, the innovation is around his knowledge and what he's seen that we can't go and buy, right? We can't achieve 30 and 40 years of something that happened over that time period is impossible. We can only partner and work with folks like that, right? So that's it for me. I don't know if there's anything that we kind of left out. The students, I hope you guys are satisfied with being here, but again, ultimately, Leroy, I think it's really about, the next step too. And how we march forward, how we communicate.
I have one more question.
Yep.
How many of you, just for curious, like, do you guys know that Baton Rouge has an entrepreneur week in there? Can you raise your hand, show behind? I think that's the problem. Like, to have an entrepreneur week based in Baton Rouge for stuff like this, where you're in the room. I'm big on meeting people where they are, right? So if I want to be in this space and be around all of this stuff, how do we get into that area where the people are? I think a lack of exposure for something that's big as an entrepreneur week, and not many people in Baton Rouge know it. I met with a guy at LSU in the entrepreneurship school.
Yep.
Don't know Baton Rouge as an entrepreneurship.
Yeah, we didn't get a chance to touch on the fuel grant. We didn't get a chance to really dive deep into Ace to the Future, Britt. I don't know if you feel like being put on the spot to describe your perspective on it. Matter of fact, Britt, give us a 10-second spiel. Yeah.
We have some partners in the room as well, Salim. This was awarded in September of 2022 through the Infrastructure Act. So it's $75 million with Lake Charles, Lafayette, Houma, Thibodeau, and New Orleans in work of decarbonization in the Gulf Coast. What has been the biggest advantage of us receiving that grant before the Infrastructure Act is that it's allowed collaboration and doors that would never have been open that we've already started to open. And as you mentioned, we have a lot more work to do. But the good news is for Louisiana, A, we're ahead in this, and B, we're not that many of us compared to Houston. So we have an opportunity to really collaborate and pivot. So that's why, when we kind of came, how, as you've mentioned, is you've got to get the word out because you've got to get people in the room. So we all will work tirelessly to get us there together.
Thank you. That's it for me.
Yes? Okay.
Thank you, guys.